Hello all, very good morning. Thanks for joining the session. Let me share my screen. So yesterday we have seen the clear difference if we implement the application using Spring Boot, how much effort it has been reduced rather than creating the application using the traditional Spring Web MVC. So same, the concept is Spring Web MVC only, but the implementation styles were changed. So one is with our traditional way of implementation. Another one is with the Spring Boot is what we have seen. And using Spring Boot, we have not done any changes, rather just writing the business logic. That means we have not started. That means just let me just in a moment. Let me open the yesterday's notes. The notes is already uploaded to the Google Classroom. Just let me get that notes. Classroom notes. Yes. Yeah, it seems to be I was not uploaded the notes, yesterday's notes, but that's okay. So let me um, start it today again. So 11 June 22, topic is Spring Boot. Topic is Spring Boot. Now, yesterday we completely implemented, right? Meaning we have implemented the Spring Boot, meaning the same application. So the same application we implemented using the Spring Boot. So when we implemented the application, application using the Spring Boot, we just have written business logic, and we just extended the Tomcat web server to have the JSP engine, and then we just have configured the uh, views directory in application.properties. That's it. These are all these things only we have done. These things only we have done, right? So, but we have not configured. Dispatcher servlet, right? We have not configured the dispatcher servlet. We have not configured appconfig.java with @enable webmvc @component scan, right? And then @bean internal resource view resolver. So we have not configured this. Rather, all these things were configured automatically by the Spring Boot, but we have not configured dispatcher servlet as how we have done its configuration, how we have done its configuration using the traditional web development, in traditional development. I will update it to the main document, but just to see the difference. So when we implemented the same application, we have not done anything. Rather just we let me open the workspace. Rather, we just written the business logic, that is home controller we have written, home controller we have written and home.jsp we have written. That's it. But we have not configured dispatcher servlet, app config, @enable webmvc, @component scan. We have not configured these. These are all automatically got configured, right? Why and how? So how these are all automatically got configured. So what is the Spring Boot actually, right? So let us see the Spring Boot overview now. What is Spring Boot? We already have seen the definition. Spring Boot is a utility framework. And remember one thing, please observe the things. Without writing the dispatcher servlet by us, without writing the @enable webmvc, @component scan, and even without writing the internal resource view resolver object creation, how those got internally created without writing by us, how those got created actually, how those are created, right? So how those are created? So those are created using the Spring Boot's convention over configuration approach and with the Spring Boot auto configuration. So automatically, though we have not written the dispatcher servlet, though we have not configured these annotations, so these are automatically enabled for us in the Spring Boot application using the two concepts. The concept one is convention over configuration. Concept two is auto configuration. Using these two concepts as the Spring Boot is following, because of these two concepts, so though we have not written anything, these components were enabled for us. Though we have not written anything, these components were enabled for us. So that is the reason Spring Boot is said to be an opinionated framework with the convention over configuration approach to build the Spring based applications quickly and then rapidly. So the main intention of the Spring Boot is to quickly develop the applications. So Spring Boot features are easy dependency management, auto configuration, embedded servlet container support, and Spring Boot starters. These are the four major core features of the Spring Boot, and of course the one is the Spring Boot actuator as well. So what are the main 5 features of the Spring Boot? Easy dependency management, auto configuration, embedded servlet container support, Spring Boot starters, and then Spring Boot actuator. These 5 are the core features of the Spring Boot. Now, easy dependency management, what it does. Yesterday, what we have taken, we just have taken one starter. Spring-boot-starter-web is what we have taken. Now, just go ahead. Sorry, let me go to pom.xml file. Let me go to pom.xml file of the Spring Boot application. So just right click on pom.xml file, go to Spring, edit status. And here we just have taken Spring Web as the starter. That means Spring-boot-starter-web. This is only we have taken. This is only we have taken. But I have not started how many ways we can create the Spring Boot application. Please follow with me. Okay, please follow with me. I will explain all other things as well. Okay, we are now here looking at the Spring Boot overview. I'm not discussed how many ways we can create a Spring Boot application yet. That discussion we have to do. However, now easy dependency management is the first feature of the Spring Boot, and we are now trying to understanding what is that meaning. So if you can see here, we just have added one starter. In earlier traditional web development, what we have done in our traditional web development, we have taken the versions for each and every dependency we were taken. But in the Spring Boot, we don't have any versions here. In Spring Boot, we don't have any versions here. So that means what? the dependencies are easily maintaining by the dependencies along with its versions are easily maintaining by the Spring Boot itself. So that is called easy dependency management is one of the feature. So the first thing to note is the use of the dependencies named Spring-Boot-Starter. So all the Spring Boot dependencies will be like starts with the Spring-Boot-Starter, and the group ID is same org.springframework.boot. If you can see Spring-Boot-Starter, Spring-Boot-Starter, Spring-Boot-Starter. So whatever the dependency you have, you will take in the Spring Boot, those will be prefixed with the Spring-Boot-Starter and which belongs to org.springframework.boot package. And here we have the scope is provided for the Tomcat, and the scope is a test for this Spring Boot starter test. And this is the embedded Jasper dependency we added to make this web server also an application, so not application server, but just to have the JSP container inside this web server. So remember that most of the time we use the same configuration like a Spring-Boot-Starter. So when we add the Spring-Boot-Starter-web dependency, it will by default to pull all the commonly used libraries while developing the Spring Web applications. So what are all the commonly used libraries? Maybe Spring Web MVC, JSON, Validation API, and Tomcat. So these are all the commonly used dependencies while developing the Spring Web MVC application. So these dependencies were by default pulled by this Spring-Boot-Starter-web. For example, if we can go to this dependency hierarchy, now we just were added only one starter, that is Spring-Boot-Starter-web, but it added it when we add this Spring-Boot-Starter-web, we just were added the starter. You might also got one question now, sir, what is the starter meaning? What is the starter? So the starter I will explain later in time. The starter meaning, before understanding the starter, we need to understand first this one pattern we need to understand. So before understanding the starters concept, we need to understand one design pattern. So I will explain what is the starter and all, just maybe in this session or maybe in the next session. But first, let us understand how it is easily maintaining the dependencies. So when we added the Spring-Boot starter web, it pulled the Spring Boot starter, starter JSON, starter Tomcat, Spring Web, and Spring Web MVC. So these dependencies are automatically gets pulled by the starter web, and also the respective versions of this web and then web MVC also taken care by this Spring-Boot-Starter-web. So when we use the Spring Boot, we no need to worry about the versions. The versions resolution will be taken care by the Spring Boot itself. So how it is taking the versions resolution, we will discuss. Now, first let us complete this easy.
Sir, I have one question, sir. Here, Spring Boot starter Tomcat already there under Spring Boot starter web. So why then again we need to add the dependency for Spring Boot starter Tomcat?
No, we were not added Spring Boot starter Tomcat dependency. We were added the Jasper, Tomcat embedded Jasper. Why? Because the Tomcat contains only the Servlet engine, not the JSP engine.
So that's how we understood. But I can see that there is another dependency is there for Spring Boot starter. It is having for twice. I can see that. Yes, the Spring Boot starter. So It is also available under Spring Boot Starter Web.
Correct.
This explain, yes.
It resolved actually. This is the provided one. If we can
Okay.
see, the Spring Boot Starter Web is a compiled scope. So if you can see the starter tomcat, it is added.
Yes.
And then the Spring Boot Starter tomcat is the provided one. That means what, when we take the spring-boot-starter-web, that itself is giving one. When we take the spring-boot-starter-web, this itself is giving one spring-boot-starter-tomcat. And from the Spring Boot 2.5.x, when we taken the simple Spring Web project with the boot starter, meaning the web starter, if we just take the project with the web starter, so this is also having the tomcat, plus explicitly this is also adding the provided scope tomcat. Why it is adding? Now got the point, right? Carefully, this is very good question actually. So observe what is happening. Spring-boot-starter-web is coming up with the tomcat. And also explicitly one more dependency is also given, like spring-boot-starter-tomcat. And this is with the provided scope. Now what we will do is, let us build the application. So let us build the application, run as Maven install. And let us see the jar file or var file created. Just to answer this question, of course, going forward, we will do a detailed discussion, but just to answer the question, I am trying to, let me just change it to JDK compiler. The compiler is 1.5. Let me change it to the 11. Apply and close. Yes. Now let us build it. So you understood, right? Now what I am trying to explaining, why 2 times spring-boot-starter tomcat dependency given in the Spring Boot project is what I'm now trying to explaining. So let me go here. Yeah, compiler is changed. Now let me run as the Maven install. So let us first build one var file. In that var file, let us see few things. And by seeing that var file, let us understand why 2 times the spring-boot-starter tomcat is given. One is by default coming up with the web starter dependency, and another one is explicitly they were added. This is what we have not added. Spring Boot project itself only given, but with the scope of provided. So what does it mean? Just in a moment, let the application be built. Yes, application is built, and then yeah, so downloading the required dependencies, let it download. Yes, build success. Now once the build success, let us go to this var file. Go to tomcat, sorry, go to this target, just refresh. Now we got this one. Right, this is the var file and this is the var file extracted. Now if you can see the library, right? In library, carefully observe when we build the var file. Carefully observe when we build the var file. Carefully observe when we build the var file. The compiled scope dependencies will also come into the var file. This is we already discussed. The dependencies in pom.xml file with the compiled scope, whatever are the compiled, right? So with the compiled scope will also come to our var file. So go here. Now see, Spring embedded core, Jasper also we have taken, and then spring-boot-starter-tomcat is not here. Do you see spring-boot-starter-tomcat? Is it here? No.
No, sir.
Why? Because earlier, now he excluded that starter tomcat. Why? Because if we deploy this var file in usually to deploy the application in external servers like JBoss, WebLogic, or another tomcat, external tomcat, we will build the var file. So he removed the tomcat from that var file. Why? Because if we have the tomcat, maybe that not work for the JBoss. This var file may not work for the JBoss, and this var file may not work for the WebLogic. So that is the reason to make it a generic web var. So he removed the tomcat dependency. But when we run it from the IDE, Spring Boot IDE, as the web starter requires the tomcat to start, so web starter itself will start the tomcat container. So two things here. The Spring Boot starter coming as part of this web starter. When we run the application from IDE, or when we run the application from command line to start the application, tomcat is required. That tomcat is also given by this Spring Boot starter web. But to deploy this application in some external servers, then the tomcat should not be there in this var file. That is the reason the overriding the var file in this Spring Boot starter web with the provided scope, so that when we build the application, the tomcat don't go inside the var file, and this var file is easily deployed anywhere. Got the concept? Why we got two times?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Yes.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. So earlier, before Spring Boot 2.5, we used to do like this. Before Spring Boot 2.5, we only get the starter web, but not this tomcat. Like this externally, we didn't get this one. So when we are targeted to deploy for the WebLogic or maybe external servers, we used to do this exclusion. So like this we used to do. Dependency by dependency exclusion, and in exclusions there are dependencies. So just let me control Z. Exclusion by exclusion. In this exclusion by exclusion, we have taken like group ID and then artifact ID, something like this. And then we used to build the application. Then what happened? In the var file, we excluded this tomcat. This is before the Spring Boot 2.5. But after Spring Boot 2.5 and from the Spring Boot 2.5, we even no need to do this, because Spring Boot guys only giving us excluding the tomcat dependency in the var file to deploy it in the external servers. That is the meaning of it. Fine. So if you can see this, so the dependencies are easily managing, and just if we add the starter web, carefully observe, please carefully observe. Just if we start the starter web, just if we add the starter web, we got the Spring-boot starter, Spring-boot starter JSON also. That means what? By default, when we take a Spring Boot with the web starter, I'm talking about web starter. Please note down the tomcat is coming by default in Spring Boot. If we take the Spring Boot starter web only, That means let me create one more Spring Boot project without taking the starter web. Okay, so everything is same. Just next. I don't select anything here, but it is a Spring Boot framework, Spring Boot application. I'll just click on the finish. I don't selected any starter. That means any dependency, but still it is a Spring Boot project. Let it complete. Let it complete this complete get import. Maybe it will complete. Yes, building the workspace. Fine, done. Now if you can see this pom.xml file, I have not taken, but see by default what it given, starter web. Okay, so just let me delete it. I'm getting little doubt on it. Let me again create the Spring Boot project. I just would like to showcase you. So new Java starter project. So Spring Boot Web MVC 1. Go next. We have not chosen any dependencies here. Nothing, nothing is selected. Click on next and then finish. Nothing we selected, right? So now let's see how it will come. Now let's see how it will come. So this is the boot one. Now, so building workspace, yes, is the boot one, pom.xml file. Now see this, what happened. So from the IDE, when we create a Spring Boot project without selecting anything, by default, it is choosing the spring-boot-starter-web dependency. So when it is spring-boot-starter-web dependency, it automatically creating a Tomcat was automatically giving the JSON by default JSON format, JSON media type it is giving, and by default a Spring Web MVC framework it is enabling, so that it also have the validation support and all, global exception handling and all, and it also have the Spring Boot starter, which is having the default logging mechanism. If you can see default logging mechanism, so default it is providing the logging mechanism, auto configurations, right? And then the YAML support, and then the uh, JSON support. See this JSON. In JSON, we have the JSON binding libraries, JSON data binding, JSON data type, right? So JSON data bind annotation it is using, which will be used for the exposing and then consuming the JSON data from our application. Our application going forward, we will write the REST full web services. At that moment, we'll expose the JSON data. So to expose JSON data, we don't need to do anything. By default, the JSON data will be exposed by default. So that is because of the spring-boot-starter-web dependency, right? Now, how it is managing the versions. So though we have not given any versions, but now we are able to see the versions here. So how the versions are managing now. So if we can see here, there is a parent by parent tag here. There is a parent by parent tag here. So to understand why this parent by parent tag, we need to understand one more thing. That is the one moment. We need to understand one pattern now. Let me go and then explain that pattern just in a moment. Let me go and then explain that pattern. Design consideration documents, probably I already have provided. So how these versions are resolving is what I'll explain just in a moment of time. just in a moment of time. How the versions are resolving, let's see. So there are a couple of design consideration documents. Just let me give those documents. Okay, Spring Boot auto configuration profiles and all. This is Spring Boot things, and then this is a project thing. Spring REST, the project thing. There is a pattern actually called bill of materials pattern. There is a pattern called bill of materials pattern. So that bill of materials pattern now is giving us these versions. What is that bill of materials pattern? How it will work? Now let us understand that bill of materials pattern. So in order to understand the bill of materials pattern, now let us create one simple project which is taking the data JPA with the 2 versions. So rather than theoretically I am explaining, just let me find out that material. It's already there. Otherwise, let me switch to my another classroom. So if not, then I have to get and then add here. So design considerations. I have added the design consideration documents also. By showing the document, I will explain. It is easy for you to understand. Just let me go back. Cleaning Spring Boot, not this one. Just a moment. Let me find out that. Design considerations. So I believe this document is also with you. If not, let me download it and then upload. This is very important, design considerations. So let me upload these documents also in your Google Classroom. Microservices and design considerations. One moment. Let me also download this one and then upload these 2 things to your classroom. Perfect. Now just let me close everything. Switch back to our classroom. Yes. So SBMS2 classwork. Let me add one design consideration. Keep on, we will upload this design considerations assignment. So design considerations. I'm creating it as an assignment because we keep on update these design consideration documents here. These 2 let me upload. However, once these design considerations documents uploaded, now let me open the bill of materials pattern. Very, very important. So far we understood the various design patterns, right? Throughout this course, you definitely will be understood a lot of patterns, and I'll also give one material with all the patterns in a single document. So going forward, but not now, please don't ask me at this moment. Later on time, I will provide it. So now let us understand the bill of materials pattern. Why we are going to this bill of materials pattern? Because we are now very interested how these dependencies are coming. How these dependencies are coming, meaning how the versions of the dependencies are coming in the Spring Boot. Though we have not given any versions, but how the versions are resolving. And if we give only just one starter, it is downloading all other dependencies using the transitive dependencies that we know. Maven supports transfer dependencies. Using transfer dependencies, it downloaded all the dependent jar files. That is fine. But from where these versions are coming and how the versions are resolving and why this parent by parent tag is given in every Spring Boot project. You can take this, our first e-commerce Spring Boot project. There also we have the parent by parent. And the next project we have taken, there also we can see parent by parent. What is this parent by parent is doing actually? What now? Two questions in our mind. How the versions for the dependencies are resolving? Point number one. Point number two, what is this parent by parent? So for these two questions, the answer will be given by the bill of materials pattern. So what is this bill of materials pattern? So if you use the Maven dependency management, then we must have faced the versions mismatch problem, dependencies versions mismatch problem. What does it mean? What does it mean? Let us try to create one simple project now. Already, yeah. So let us try to create a simple project now. Just a Maven project I will create, a simple Maven project. So these are all I will push to the repository as well. So let's take a simple Maven project. This simple Maven project is name is bill of materials demo. So com.DURGASOFT and bill of materials demo. Bill of materials demo is our application name. Let the application will be created. Fine, application is created. Now in pom.xml file, carefully observe please. Carefully observe please. In pom.xml file, I will add two dependencies. One is the data JPA, second one is the Spring context. So now let me add the two dependencies. Dependency by dependency. Group ID. One group ID is org.springframework.data.jpa and artifact ID. So it is just data. Artifact ID is spring-data-jpa. This is the artifact ID. And let us take its version as 1.0.3 release. Sir, you can take another version also, na? I can take another version, but this example is providing you the understanding. This example, what I'm taking, will provides you the understanding of the bill of materials pattern in a better way. That is the reason to make the problem creation. I'm taking this version, and to resolve that problem creation, we'll apply the we will apply the bill of materials pattern. Now let me check another dependency. This dependency group ID is so org.springframework.context, not context, org.springframework, and then the artifact ID is spring-context. Artifact ID is spring-context. And let us take the version that is 4.3.18. Release. Perfect. That's all. That's all. Now we just have taken the two dependencies. One is Spring Data JPA, second one is the Spring context. Now let us go to dependency hierarchy. If you can see now, if you can see now, what happened? Spring Core 3.0.5 is there, and Spring Core 4.3.18 is there. If you can see, Spring Beans is 4.3.18. Spring Context is 4.3.18. but Spring Core is 3.0.5, right? And then Spring AOP again 4.3.18. Now just understand one problem here. What is Spring Core container? Meaning how the Spring Core container will be created. Spring Core container contains the modules or the components like beans, context, core, expression, right? So beans, context, core, expression. So these are all 4 components of our Spring Core module, isn't it? Now, in the Spring Core module, if we can see these dependencies, all beans, context, expression is with one version, and Spring Core is with the one version. So if we go, these are 4.3.18 and this is 3.0.5. Maybe some features won't work, right? Maybe some features won't work. We will get some errors in runtime because we are using here 4.3.18, 4.x. We have a lot of annotations were added, but those annotations may not work with this Spring Core 3.0.5 because those annotations were not there. So because of these versions mismatches, we may get the problems in runtime. Our application may get the problem in runtime because of this versions mismatching here. Then what is the solution? Is, see this. These different versions of the Spring dependencies are not desirable and can cause unexpected compile time or runtime issues. So this is where Maven's bill of material or BOM comes into the picture, right? You got the problem now. The problem is if our application will have the different versions of the jar files, maybe undesirable jar files, undesired version of the jar files, like Spring Core is 3.0.5, whereas Spring Beans, whereas Spring Context and all are with the 4.3.18, right? So which definitely causes the undesirable issues. So that is the problem. To solve that problem, we have a concept called bill of material. So BOM stands for bill of materials. A bill of material is a special kind of BOM file. This is underlined. That is the reason I highlighted it with a red color. A BOM is a special kind of BOM that is used to control the versions of project dependencies. Now, who will control the project dependencies? Versions of the project dependencies? Bill of materials POM. So bill of materials contains one POM.xml file, which contains all the versions. Okay. Now there are 2 ways to use the BOM file in our application. One is inherit from the parent. Second one is the importing the BOM. So let us see the first case, inherit from the parent. Now what we'll do is, let us add one parent by parent. So go here, here, let us add parent by parent. Group ID is org.spring framework, and then artifact ID is spring-framework-BOM, and then version. Which version of BOM we should have to take? 4.3.18.release. Just assume the latest version. Now, when we add this parent by parent, that means what? We have a Spring Framework BOM file. This Spring Framework BOM file is imported into our application, and then now all are coming to the same versions. All Spring Core container versions are with now the same version as that of the BOM, except JPA, because JPA is a different project in Spring, right? So it's a different project in Spring. but all the Spring dependencies are now with the same versions. Now the problem of version incompatibility will be resolved, right? Now the problem of the incompatible of the versions has been resolved because of this bill of materials pattern. So what is this Spring-framework-BAM? So this is also a special kind of PAM file. So that means this is also a PAM file. So let me go here, PAM. Now see this Spring Framework BAM. We can see 4.3.18 is what we have chosen, right? 4.3.18.release. Okay, it's PAM file. Maybe I may not show here, but I can show the PAM file. Spring Framework PAM file. Spring Framework BAM GitHub. Yes. Series. Let us go with this Spring Framework BAM. These are all the possible versions. Maybe he has taken from the official Spring website, but if you can see this, any of the BAM you can take. It is a special kind of PAM file which contains all the versions inside in it, which contains all the dependencies along with the versions inside in it. That means what this Spring-framework-BAM is already having the dependencies with the versions inside in it. So that is the reason here we no need to add any version. You got my point? Here we no need to add any version. So from where the version is coming then? The version is inheriting from this BAM, bill of materials pattern. Similarly, in our Spring Boot also, there is a BAM called Spring-boot-starter-parent, and whose version is 2.7.0. So the Spring-boot-starter-parent BAM file, which contains all the dependencies along with versions. So as a result, we no need to take the versions here because versions are getting inherited from this bill of material, that is Spring-boot-starter-parent. So now, did you understand the concept of bill of materials pattern? Or any questions in bill of materials pattern? Any questions, or is it clear? Okay, cool. If no questions, that is very good. Now you might got an idea. What is this parent by parent now, right? So this is a bill of materials pattern which is used to resolve the invalid version dependencies versions mismatch. So these problems will be resolved using this parent by parent. So now what is happening? I will draw one diagram. I will draw one diagram. Now let us see this Spring-boot-starter-parent bill of material. Now let us try to understand, and then I will draw one diagram. So parent Maven I will take. Parent pom.xml I will take. Pom.xml GitHub. Yeah, this is the official GitHub of the Spring Boot. Not official, but maybe this guy forked. This guy forked the Spring Boot GitHub. Let me go to that. Let me take the Spring Boot GitHub. Okay. Spring-boot-starter, GitHub, Spring. Scroll down, Spring projects, Spring Boot. So this is the Spring projects. Again, let me take this one. Spring projects also given the GitHub for sure. They might also definitely given the GitHub, but let me see the samples. Yes, spring.io is the GitHub, official GitHub of the Spring Boot. And here start.spring.io is also there, which is one another repository, right? And then there were a lot of repositories. Go here. So this is the start.spring.io. About this, I will explain going forward. Now, what we can do, let us search for the, oh no, it is not here. Okay. However, let me take this BOM file only. So let me take this BOM file, this person given one BOM file, right? I'll try to make you to understand this BOM file. So he given just till spring-boot-starter parent 2.16, or else let me also try Spring Boot starter parent pom.xml file. There should be some XML file. Let me take it. Spring Boot starter parent. This is the repository. Just a moment. What I'm trying to explaining you is, I would like to just see the pom.xml file of that os.springframework.boot. For that, there is a Spring Framework Git repository as well. So that official Git repository is what I'm trying to looking for. So this is also fine. Sona type repository, and ours is what 2.7.0. Perfect. Now just to see this, carefully observe this. This is the spring-boot-starter-parent, right? So spring-boot-starter-parent. Now just let me open the tool draw.io. In the tool, let me write. Fine. So scroll down now. Slowly scroll down now. Our Spring Boot application is depending on this spring-boot-starter-parent. Now the spring-boot-starter-parent is also have one parent called spring-boot-dependencies. That means what? The spring-boot-starter-parent is depending on the spring-boot-dependencies. That is one more project. And what is the spring-boot-starter-parent contains? If you can see carefully, it contains all the plugins. Scroll down. It contains all the plugins, if you can see, right? All the plugins. So, but where the dependencies now, along with their versions, it is in the spring-boot-dependencies. Now go here and pom.xml file. Here only we can search, I believe. Just let me duplicate the tab and then search for the spring-boot dependencies 2.7.0. Perfect. Now see this. This don't have any spring-boot parent. So what did you understand from this one? What did you understand from this one? Just let me go and then draw one diagram. This is our Spring Boot project. This is our Spring Boot project. So our Spring Boot application is depending on the spring-boot-starter-parent. So it is depending on the spring-boot-starter-parent, which is one more project. And the spring-boot-starter-parent is inheriting using our project, our Spring Boot project, using the bill of materials pattern. Just let me plug in my charger. Perfect. So it is inheriting into our Spring Boot application. One moment, guys. Just a moment. Yeah, it is inheriting into our Spring Boot application using the bill of materials pattern. Got it? So using bill of materials pattern, it is importing into our application so that whatever are there in this parent, all will come to us. That means what this parent contains? This contains all the plugins. So what are all the plugins we have, or what are all the plugins this contains? Meaning the spring-boot-starter contains what are all the plugins? Again, we will discuss maybe later on time. Why? Because there is a detailed discussion is required in this plugins part. So just to see what are all the plugins it is doing. In future, we will discuss maybe tomorrow's class, meaning on Monday's class, we'll discuss fat jar file versus the lightweight jar file, fat var file versus the lightweight var file. At that moment, we will discuss about these plugins. At that moment, we will discuss about these plugins. But what you can understand for now is the spring-boot-starter-parent contains the plugins, and also it is depending on one more project. It is depending on one more project, that is spring-boot-starter-dependencies. So spring-boot-starter-dependencies. So it is depending on this one. So that means what? Whatever are there in the dependencies will come to parent. Whatever are there in the parent will come to here. So ideally, the dependencies related stuff also will come to our Spring Boot project. This is our Spring Boot project. We Shopify e-commerce application. This is our application, Boot app, right? So this is our application. We Shopify e-commerce Boot app. This is our application. So our application is now getting plugins from the parent section and versions plus dependencies from this Spring Boot starter dependencies. So what is there inside this Spring Boot starter dependencies? Now just let us copy it and then go to go to here. Just let me take one simple XML file, just one XML file, other XML file, test, go to the source, just replace it with what I copied. Now see this, what this contains. Spring-boot dependencies. So it don't have any further parent. So Spring-boot starter dependencies don't have any parent. Further, it don't have any parent. Okay. And then next, what this contains. This contains the all the dependencies. If you can see here, there is a property written. Spring Boot version 2.7.0, MyBuddies version 2.0.4, Auth version 2.0.1, Redis version. Like that, the version dependencies are taken here. And if we can go here, all the dependencies are here with the versions. If you can see, all the dependencies are here with the versions. If you can see, right? So Spring-boot dependencies. And if you can see our bill of our parent, Spring-boot starter parent, it depend on what? Spring-boot dependencies. Spring-boot dependencies. And this is what? Spring-boot dependencies. So what it is contains? It contains the Spring Boot dependencies and along with its version, right? So if you can scroll down, so dependencies are here along with the versions. See this, dependencies are here along with the versions. So now what is happening actually? How this is resolving the Spring Boot version as, how this is resolving the Spring Boot version as 2.7.0 and Spring WebMVC version as the 5.3.1, something like that. How it is resolving. So this is a only seems to be half a file. Group ID com.cpine. That means they were customized this, not the original Spring Boot dependencies file. So now let us check for the original Spring Boot dependencies file. Okay, not this com.cpine. So let us search for the original Spring Boot file, that is with the ors.springframework.boot. So let us search for that file. Yes, this is what we want. Yes, this is what we want. Whatever we copied is wrong. This is what we want. Just download. Wow. Not found. 2.7.0 is not found in this Sona type, but let me choose the earlier version. This is also not found. Let me choose the any other version. Any other version, just in case. Yes. Yes, this is the correct one. This is the correct one. Check this one out. This is our correct file. Spring-boot dependencies. See, this don't have any parent. And now see, it contains all the versions. So all the versions it have. Even Spring WebMVC version also. See all the versions. All the versions. Spring WebMVC version also. Timeleaf version. Spring WebMVC version. Whatever are by default supporting by the Spring Boot, all the versions are here. And also the dependencies are also coming from here. So we can see web dependency. Spring-web. See this. Spring, let us see. So this actuator configuration, all are coming from here. Did you see this? Boot, starter, Cassandra, all are coming from this dependencies Maven file. So here we also can see our Spring Web MVC somewhere. Let's go to yes. See the Spring Framework version. Got it? Now from this one, as a Spring Framework version is mentioned here. So from this one, we are getting the, see, the BOM. So the BOM of the Spring Framework is we are getting from these dependencies. Now what do you understand? From these dependencies, we are getting the Spring Framework BOM to here, like how we have taken here, the Spring Framework BOM. The same BOM is now also giving to our Spring Boot application from the dependencies. As a result, the dependencies, Spring Web MVC dependencies are resolving here with the versions. Though we no need to mention the versions, it is easily managing because of this bill of materials pattern, and thus from the Spring Boot starter dependencies, all the versions, all the dependencies are inheriting to our application using the bill of materials pattern. So is it clear? Any questions here in this concept?
Sir, I have one question.
Mm.
Actually, in parent, we are mentioning any version, suppose 3.0.
Mm.
Okay,
Mm.
it goes to the BOM, and if the 3.0 is exist, the corresponding 3.0 related all the dependencies are pulling to our project.
Correct.
Here, in the last, you said the Spring Boot starter dependency.
Mm.
It has also containing number of dependencies.
Correct.
Where the in the BOM file dependencies are exist, or in the dependencies dependencies are exist, where the original dependencies are exist.
Okay, let me write one more also here. So this Spring Boot starter parent contains the plugins only, not dependencies. So this contains the plugins. This contains the plugins, and this Spring Boot starter dependencies contains the dependencies along with the versions. So this contains, so this contains dependencies plus versions. This contains. Now clear your question? Correct. So this contains the plugins only, and this is inheriting the Spring Boot starter dependencies, which contains the dependencies plus versions. But starter parent contains only the plugins.
So BOM doesn't contain any dependencies, right? It is a it is a procedure like.
It's a bill of material pattern. That means the parent by parent is we have taken, right? Into that parent by parent, the BOM meaning another special POM file. That POM file is inheriting into our application.
Okay.
So it is a pattern. It is a pattern, like how it is injecting or importing.
Yeah, got it.
Okay.
Sir, what is the difference between dependencies and plugins, sir?
So dependencies meaning this contains the jar files plus their versions, and plugins meaning how the application should be built as a jar file, as a var file, as an executable jar file, and executable var file, non-executable jar file, non-executable var file. So this is what the plugins will take care. Meaning now we just have build one jar file, isn't it? So sorry, var file we build. Now we got this var file, isn't it? If we can see two types of var files we got. One is var, second one is var.original. So what is the difference between these two, right? And how these will work? One is executable, second one is non-executable. So To make a executable war file, non-executable jar file, building a jar file, building a war file will be taken care by these plugins. Okay, but in the war file, what are the dependencies to be go? What are their versions to be go will be come from these dependencies. Clear?
Okay, sir. Sir,
Yeah.
then sir, plugin means the Maven plugins.
Maven plugins, correct.
Oh.
Maven. So see here, Maven plugins only, if you can see. This is our parent. Let us take. Yeah, this is our Spring-Boot-Starter parent. If you can see, all are Maven plugins only. So just scroll down. Yeah, see this. Maven plugin. So compiler plugin, fail-safe plugin, and then the resources plugin, Maven jar plugin. So this is what we will discuss in our Monday session. Jar file plugin, and then there is a war file plugin, war plugin, resource plugin. So this plugins concept we will discuss on Monday, and then we will see a fat jar file and then fat war file, fat jar file. So what I am talking exactly is, if I can go to this properties and copy this, just go here, target, you can see the var file here generated, right? The var file generated with the two different size. One is 2636 KB, second one is 18354 KB. That is one difference. And now let me try to run it. Java space -jar v shopify .var. So now this .var is there, .original is there. So when I say .var, see, application is started. Application is started, meaning Tomcat is started, Tomcat is running. Finally, application is started. How it started, what is happening behind the scene, these are all we will discuss going forward for sure. Maybe this is not the right time, but as the situation came about the plugins, I'm just reminding this to you so that in the on Monday we can discuss more. Now see, again let me execute the same command for the original .jar. See, it is saying there is no manifest attribute. That means what? So same version of var file, which is coming as an executable, which is coming as a non-executable. So what is executable, what is non-executable, and how they will be work and all we will discuss on our Monday's session. So in today's session, we understood the bill of materials pattern, and then we understood how the version dependencies will be resolved. So now let us see how many ways the Spring Boot project will be created, and what way will be the optimal one in real time, which way we have to choose. This we will discuss now. So Spring Boot project creation. Now I think you got the clarity, right? We are now discussing about the Spring Boot features. In that features, we are discussed about this easy dependency management. As part of this easy dependency management, we understood the bill of materials pattern and how the Spring Boot is resolving the dependencies along with its versions. That is what we now understood. And we also need to understand this auto configuration. That is a huge concept. So before understanding the auto configurations and all further concepts, I would just like to explain now how many ways we can create the Spring Boot project. Then slowly I will come and then explain this auto configuration and the starters, all these concepts I will explain. Got it? Now let us see how many ways we can create the Spring Boot project. So Spring Boot project can be created in 3 ways: using the command line tool and using the IDE like STS, Spring Tool Suite, and then the IntelliJ. So there were 2 IDEs nowadays in the market which are providing the out of the box support for the Spring Boot. That means if you use those IDEs will have the mechanism of creating the Spring Boot project. There are 2 ways for BOM. There are 2 ways for BOM. One is import, second one is inherit. So Inherit is what we discussed, and then import we will see later on time. That is not required actually, because Spring Boot is following only the parent by parent, but not import. So this is not following by the Spring Boot. This is what it is following by the Spring Boot. So about this import, that's okay. I'm not discussing. Okay, so there is a import and there is a inheritance in the case of BAM. Fine. So now let us create the Spring Boot project. How many ways we can create the Spring Boot project? So Spring Boot project can be created in 3 ways. One is Spring Boot CLI. Second one is the IDE, like what we are using now, Spring Tool Suite, right? Spring Tool Suite IDE. So this IDE is developed on top of the Eclipse. This IDE is developed on top of the Eclipse with the out of the box support for the Spring Boot. So there are only 3 such IDEs we have. One is the STS, Spring Tool Suite. Second one is the IntelliJ. And third one is the Visual Studio Code. So these IDs are providing the Spring Boot support. So using these IDs, we can easily implement the Spring Boot applications. Sir, what is Spring Boot support? We are not understanding. What is mean is, for example, see this. If you type something, automatically it is populating. If you type something, automatically it is populating. See, that means what? IDE is giving us the content assistance by identifying it as a Spring Boot project. So these are all makes our development to be go very faster and help us. So that is the reason there are 3 IDs now in the market. So one is STS, second one is IntelliJ IDE, and third one is the Visual Studio Code. So these 3 IDs are very popularly using. Now the people started using this Visual Studio Code very much, because using the single studio code, using the single IDE, we can develop front end, we can develop back end. Meaning we can develop the React applications, Angular applications. Also, we can develop the Spring Boot microservices also. So single IDE will be helpful for us in doing the 2 activities, meaning 2 implementations. That is the reason people are started using this Visual Studio Code. You also going forward, see, going forward in our microservices implementation, when we are doing the React integration, then we will see this Visual Studio Code IDE usage. But for now, let us go with this STS, Spring Tool Suite only. Okay, that means our IDE will be the Spring Tool Suite. If anyone is already know how to use the IntelliJ, you also can go to use IntelliJ, go and then use the IntelliJ. But why I'm choosing the STS is, this is looks like Eclipse. So most of the students know about the Eclipse. So they feel very easy about this STS also, because it is just looks like Eclipse. All the features are like Eclipse only. So throughout our implementation, I will use the STS. And when the microservices will come for implementing the React integration, I will use the Visual Studio Code. And also for Docker, I will use Visual Studio Code. For Kubernetes development, I will use the Visual Studio Code. Kubernetes development meaning Kubernetes manifest files we need to write. I think Kubernetes is out of scope for you, right? Only Docker is in your scope. So at that moment, we will use, while writing the Docker files, we will use this Visual Studio Code. Okay, however, now let us see the first option, that is the Spring Boot CLI. So how to create a Spring Boot project using the CLI, and when we will use this CLI, where we will use this CLI. So let me first go and then download the Springboot CLI. First, we need to download the Springboot CLI. So this is Springboot CLI. Okay, the Springboot CLI is a command line tool that you can use if you want to quickly develop a Spring application. It lets you run groovy scripts, which means that you have a familiar Java-like syntax without so much boilerplate code. So Spring Boot CLI intention is what, if you have a groovy script, would like to execute it using one environment, then we can use the Spring Boot CLI environment. Not only groovy script, Java also we can execute. So everything will be given by the CLI only. Just we need to write the business logic. How it will be, let us see now. So installing the CLI. The Spring Boot CLI command line interface can be installed manually by using SDK man. So meaning SDK manager, or by using Homebrew or MacBoots. So this is getting started section, like how and then from where we can download it. Go here. So manual installation. Let us go with this manual installation. Click on this Spring Boot CLI 2.7.0 bin.zip. It will be downloaded, a zip file for us. Now it went to JFrog. He is maintaining that in the JFrog, the zip file. Let us wait for some time. It might download for us. Yes, it downloaded for us from the JFrog. So he is using JFrog as a artifactory, meaning the Spring Boot CLI is maintaining in the artifactory called JFrog. However, now it is downloaded for us. Once we download it, what we are talking about? We are talking about developing a Spring Boot application using the command line interface. And we already have seen developing, meaning writing a Spring Boot application using the IDE, that is STS. We already have seen. And then third approach is using this start.spring.io website, we can create the Spring Boot project. So 3 ways we have. So one is using the CLI, second one is using the IDE, third one is using the website. So in real time, most of the members will try to create it using this website in real time, most of the members. And when we use the IDE also internally will go to this start.io only. And from there only it will be downloaded. For example, how we can create the project using the start.io. Just click on it. Now see how we can easily download. So let me just give com.DURGASOFT, and then artifact ID is just, I will give the demo. It's a war file and I want with the Java 11, and let me add the dependency. For example, web dependency, let me add. That's it. Now I can click on this generate. So when we said generate, then application is downloading as a zip to us. The Spring Boot application is downloading as a zip to us. Now same to same, when you also create from the IDE, for example, new starter project, just click on next. Let me choose the web starter, click on next. See this, it is also going to where start.spring.io. It is also going to start.spring.io. That means when we create the project using IDE also, it is going to again start.spring.io only, with the options whatever we have chosen here. With those options, it is calling one API starter.zip and then submitting whatever the details required to it, and then downloading the application. But downloading the application to where? downloading the application to our workspace location. So when we create the application using this web, it is downloading to the downloads directory. But when we create the project using the IDE, though IDE is also going to the same start.spring.io, but the project will be downloaded to our workspace. Got it right? So either we use IDE, either we use the start.spring.io. Both mean for same. But if we explicitly create in start.spring.io, then we have to go here, extract it, import it into our IDE. So some extra process we need to do. So rather than doing that, it is easy. We can even eliminate that extra work for us just by creating the Spring Boot project from this IDE. Not only this IDE, any IDE, if you create a Spring Boot project, that will go to our start.spring.io and then download from there. Okay, this is good. Now we have downloaded our CLI as well. Now let us go and then see how we can create a simple applications using the CLI. Now just let me go to our trainings, Spring Boot MS Cloud, Spring Boot Docs. Here let me paste the CLI and let me extract the CLI. So what the CLI contains and how we can create the project, let us check. Now this is the bin 2.7.0. See what it contains. It contains the lib Spring Boot CLI.jar. It contains the bin spring.bat and then spring shell file, and there is a shell completion. By looking into it, what are you understanding? For example, your environment is a Linux environment where you don't have the IDE, where you don't have the internet support, where you don't have the IDE, where you don't have the internet support, where you cannot download the application from the start.spring.io. If that is a situation, then we can use this Spring Boot CLI to create and implement the Spring Boot applications. I repeat one more time, in the Linux environment where we don't have the internet access, or maybe the browser at least, or maybe the IDE. So in Linux environment, usually Linux servers, we don't have the graphical user interface. All the thing is we need to manage through the commands only. So there is no IDE, there is no browser. Then in such cases, if you want to create the Spring Boot projects and then execute there, then how do we do? We can do it using this Spring Boot CLI. So there is a bin and then there is a spring.bat using which we can run our CLI applications. So there is a install.txt is given. Just let us see. What is given in this text. Now see, prerequisite. Spring Boot CLI requires JDK 1.8 or above in order to run. Groovy is a packaged as part of this distribution and therefore does not need to be installed any Groovy. The CLI will be use whatever JDK it finds on your class path. To check that you have an appropriate version, you should run this one. So it is suggesting like how we can set up the Java environment variable and all. And finally, it is asking us like how we can download or how we can compile our application. Shell completion. Shell auto completion scripts are provided for bash and JSH. So this is auto completion shell related script is given, and to check our installation we can even check the spring -- version. So what I mean to say is, let us go to this bin folder, open the command prompt and then just check for this one, See, we got this Spring CLI version 2.7.0. So Monday, we will implement one application using this CLI. Okay, maybe continuously taking classes is too much overhead. So Monday, we will discuss how to create a Spring Boot components or project using this CLI. We'll execute it, and then Monday we will see the Spring Boot project creation ways and also the Spring Boot project structure, and then we will discuss the fat jar file versus lightweight jar file, and then we will discuss about the Spring Boot starter parent plugins. There's a lot of discussion yet to do that we'll do on the Monday, and probably by Wednesday, once all this done, then we will start our project using the Spring Boot, using the time leaf. That's all for today. Anything else for me? Okay, if nothing is there, then I'll stop my screen share, and then this material place the
Sir, time leaf is but UI, sir. Time leaf.
Time leaf is the UI, correct. Time leaf is the UI we will use. Lightweight UI. We no need to take this JSP container to our Tomcat. So it is very lightweight.
Okay.
Fine. So I'm stopping my screen share.
Sir, can you hear me?
Yes, I'm able to hear you.
I am having small doubt. Can I share my screen?
In order to share your screen, I have to make you as a co-host. Yes, I'm making you as a co-host. Just share your screen. Share your screen now. Yeah. Others can drop, folks. Meaning who are done for the day. So you can drop.
This first line error, not able to cannot access default fields of properties.
See, properties by properties you are added. What is that?
Now while I'm trying to do this, we already told to implement that fail on missing web. I'll do that. But before that only I'm getting this error. This is a different one.
Just save it. Save it.
Yeah.
When you create the project, you are getting this error by default.
Yeah, by default.
Okay. This is the STS. Show me. I mean, click on that one. Click on that.
Cannot access defaults.
Defaults field of properties. Defaults field of properties. Click on this sixth line number. What is that?
This one you told already. You told this one to take it as I'll do that, but this one only I'm not able to do.
So that is saying about cannot access defaults field of properties. Maybe the properties by properties only it is talking about.
I already gave, but not. If you want, I'll give it.
Even
after giving this also, it is not.
Give some property. Give some property. Anything we can do. That's okay. Anything you can give because it's just about XML. Copy properly then. Otherwise, copy from the sixth line number. Point out on the sixth line number. Point your mouse on the sixth red error is there.
Okay.
Now copy that message. No, point out there. Okay, fine. Fail on. Now save it. Control S also we can use. Still it didn't went right. So maybe copy the exact property. Correct. Seems to be same, na? Still not went.
What is this one? This one is different. You want me to create one new project otherwise in front of you?
Create once.
Right click, new project. I'm going to create Maven project.
Maven project. Create
So
simple
create simple
sample.
project. And here com.JSOft. And this one JSOft effect. Some, and this is where
Already existed, it is saying. So just give MVC1.
okay.
I
can go for next.
Next. It is downloading. Let it download. 99% is completed. Yes, done. Now go there.
So you can see this one is gone.
Okay.
Any version problem? This is a 4.13.
No, I don't think. But one moment. Model version 4.0.0. PAM model version is 4.0.0. That is fine. Let me check in my IDE what is the model version of the PAM. Just in a moment. This is also 4.0.0 only. But when we create change the version of the var plugin. Actually, without having the plugins also, it need to be resolved. Do one thing first. Go to this effective PAM. Effective PAM.
Which one?
Effective PAM. Just below PAM.xml file is there, na? Just beside that effective PAM is there. No, here in the IDE console is there.
Yeah.
Let us see the effective PAM. So that is the generated PAM actually.
Okay.
So scroll down. Source directory. Scroll down. Let us see. Scroll down. Maven plugin, resource plugin. Scroll down. Default var package, Maven var plugin. One moment. Just one moment. Let me check my effective PAM. This var plugin. Var plugin. Yes, it is 3.3.2. So var plugin need to be upgrade actually. Yours is what? 2.2.
This one Maven var plugin is 2.2.
No, actually you need to upgrade that. Seems to be your IDE need to be updated. So update it to 3.3.2.
So instead of 2.2?
Instead of 2.2. Do 3.2.2. 3.2.2.
No, it's not allowing anything.
Do one thing. Update your IDE. Seems to be this IDE is not. Is the latest one? IDE?
Yeah, 4.13.
Meaning you recently downloaded?
Yeah.
Then it should have to. Why it is taking the older Maven plugin then? Okay, do one thing. Go to application MVC1. Right click on it. Right click on the MVC1.
Okay.
Right click on it. Go to properties. Change the compilation. Just edit. Enable project specific settings. Compilation is there, na? JDK compilation. Just untick that. Enable project specific. No. Tick enable project specific settings.
Okay.
Untick use complaints environment.
Okay.
Now select from the drop down. 1.5 is there, na? Choose it to your JDK.
This one? It is JDK 16.
Yours is JDK 16.
Yeah.
Okay, so apply and then close. Okay, now again go back to one moment. Again go back to properties. Build path is there, na? Build path. No, that's okay. Go to Java build path.
Java build path, okay.
And go to JRE, edit, give the JDK.
This one?
No, alternate JRE. Click on alternate JRE.
Okay. Yeah, this is JDK 16.
JDK. Just finish it. No, is it JRE? I believe. JDK only. Yeah, finish it. Let us see. Done. Now just close this pub.xml file. Go to project and then clean it one more time. Do one thing. Not that one. Not that one. Right click on pub.xml file. Maven. Go to Maven and update project. And force update is there. Offline force update. Offline force update. Now click on OK. Let us see. Still not resolved. Now open pub.xml file. Cannot access defaults field of properties. It is capital P. Someone is suggesting something. They already have Stack Overflow. Na? What is Stack Overflow saying? Change the version of the var plugin in your pub.xml file and Maven compiler giving according to. Yeah. We have done those changes, but this is not on. Actually, IDE should have to be come up with those things. IDE is, but why this JRE is still referring to 1.5? Just right click on it. Not here. Go to build path. Configure build path. Still.
It is showing 1.5.
Click on edit. Alternate JRE. Go to installed JREs. Select that first one, JDK 16. Apply and close. Finish. Apply and close. Now this is 16. Now update pub.xml file once.
Update project.
No, still not solved. Just ping me that error. Just ping me that error. Okay, I will look into it and then let you know.
Again, it is changed to 1.5.
Yeah.
Again, it changed to 1.5. So do one thing. Right click on the project. So there is another option actually. Maven.source.compile is what we can give in the properties by properties. But if that is not the case, go to properties by properties. Go to properties by properties.
You want me to write? You want me to
Yes.
write, sir? Yeah.
Write properties by properties. In properties by properties, write our Java source compilation properties. In a moment, I will share you those properties. One moment. It is maven.source.compile or some properties there. Just in a moment, I will tell you that property, which is already there in our handout also. Yeah, maven.compiler.source.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, not here, not here. Do one thing, remove everything, delete everything.
This one.
Delete. Okay, now go to dependency hierarchy, dependencies. Okay, go to overview. Overview. Create the properties are there, right? Create properties. Properties. Create is there, na? Create in properties. Create button is enabled. See, just right besides. Just above.
Yeah.
Now type there Maven dot compiler dot source 1.8. Give the value 1.8. No, just value. Give the value 1.8.
Okay.
Now click on OK. Save it. Just save. Control S. Just Control S.
Okay.
Now also write the Maven dot compiler dot target. Create one more property. Maven dot compiler dot target. Again give the value as 1.8. Click on OK. Save it. Control S. Go to pom.xml. No, pom.xml. Just beside that effective pom is there, na? Just beside effective pom.xml. Now properties were added. Now update your plugin. Meaning right click on pom.xml file and then update. One moment. 56%, 57, 62, 63 is completed. 83, 84, 90 is completed. But still the problem is there. Now the compilation changed to 1.8, but still the problem is there, not resolved. Okay, just I will look into it and then let you know.
Okay.
Mostly it is the problem with the plugin. Seems to be the plugin is very older. It should be 3.3.2, not 2.2.
What can I do, sir? Meanwhile, shall I uninstall this and I'll go for 4.14?
I will let you know the exact IDE version.
Okay.
I'll let you know. Use
Sure.
that exact IDE version.
Okay, sure.
Yeah. Oh,
Thank you.
yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks. Hey, Spurti, I got to know. I mean, I have seen your code. I will ping in our link, meaning in our team. Sorry, in our Telegram group.
Sure.
I'll ping there. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks.